Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones. You're listening to the audio version of my newsletter. You can find a lot more at simonkjones.substack.com. When YouTube launched in 2005, I was at the tail end of my obsession with filmmaking. For a decade and a half, from the age of about 10, I'd absorbed every behind-the-scenes book and magazine and TV special I could find, and this was the 90s when it was really hard to get useful material on filmmaking craft. I studied film and English at university, starting in 1999. DVDs had become a thing, bringing with them unprecedented access to filmmakers and education in the craft. Those early Robert Rodriguez DVDs, El Mariachi, Desperados, were more instructive than 90% of my university degree. I got a job at a tech startup, making visual effects software for young and amateur filmmakers. But amateur filmmaking was astoundingly difficult back then. Most of the 90s were still analogue, terrible hi-8 video and wrestling with dual VCRs and minidisc audio dubbing, and that's if you were lucky. Digital editing became possible on home computers around 2001, but the machines were barely up to it, even at sub-HD resolutions. Anyone who successfully made anything, even vaguely half-decent, was a legend in the online filmmaking community. The trickiest bit was that it was expensive and awkward to show people your work. You had to rent or borrow a server, understand codecs and bit rates, and wait hours and hours to upload a 1-minute clip at postage stamp quality. There was a vibrant filmmaking community around the company where I was working, mostly early teens, mostly Americans. It was a pivotal moment for the industry and the nurturing of a new generation. I knew Sam and Nico, the Corridor Digital guys, when they were 12 years old, and already pushing the boundaries further than anyone else. Pioneering YouTuber turned producer Freddie W. swung by. Chris Cowan, now action director and choreographer on The Acolyte, Shang-Chi and many more, did his earliest work in that scene. He's a lovely guy, incidentally. AJ Ricker Epstein found his love of cameras and has now enjoyed a long career as a cinematographer. I remember hanging out with Adam Curley at a pub in Norwich a few months after he'd broken the world record for the most car flips while rolling the Aston Martin in Casino Royale. Matt Plummer took his amateur visual effects enthusiasm, strapped it to a rocket and blasted into a career working at Framestore as a compositor, where he's worked on almost every big Hollywood film from the last decade. While the software startup that nurtured them is long gone, acquired and subsumed into a larger, anonymous corporate entity that shut down and deleted all remnants of the 20-year-old community, those kids have gone on to quietly grow up and define much of the modern filmmaking era. There will be books written about them, in the same way books were written about the Scorsese, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola cohort. There were two key aspects to most of their successes. The first was their undeniable skill and tenacity. Is that two things? Anyway, the second was the arrival, in 2005, of YouTube. By that point it was considerably easier to shoot and edit digital video, and suddenly there was a free way to show your projects to the world on a massive scale at increasingly high quality. While most people were chuckling at YouTube for being home to silly cat videos, these young creators were busy revolutionizing their own careers and remixing the concept of the film industry, publishing short films and demo reels. I was in my mid-late 20s by this point. My life had gone off in a different direction, and a lot of the new advances were beyond my filmmaking knowledge or skill set. I'd learned how to use the previous generation of hardware and software, growing up in the 90s, and never quite managed to adapt. I missed the YouTube wave, not recognizing it for what it was until years later. There was not a little jealousy there, I admit. Around 2013, I refocused on writing rather than filmmaking. In 2015, I started publishing my first online serial, not realizing that I was onto something that would change my creative career. In 2021, I switched over to publishing via my own newsletter, using Substack as the tech foundation. And here we are, on a new wave. These don't come along often. They require the perfect alignment of creative energies and technology at the right time. Substack, Ghost, Beehive, and the other top-to-bottom newsletter systems are providing the tech foundation, and writers are more than ready to ride the wave. Our boards are ready to go. Unlike in 2005, when I couldn't figure out a way to fit into the new filmmaking paradigm. This time I feel perfectly positioned. I've been serialising for a decade already, even before committing to the newsletter game. I'm a considerably better writer than I ever was a filmmaker. If it was just me, then it wouldn't be a wave, obviously. It's not just me. There's hundreds, thousands of us. Fiction writers, journalists, essayists, memoir writers, cartoonists, comedy writers. We're all here, riding the wave. We were here at the right time, in the right place, with the right skills and tenacity. Writers have been around for centuries, long before the filmmakers and the game designers and the podcasters. We've been oddly starved of tech innovation, watching bemused from the sidelines as movies and games and radio and music reinvented themselves for the internet era. If we get this right, and if the people at Substack and Ghost and Beehive and the others get it right and stay true to their missions, we'll look back on the 2020s as a time every bit as pivotal and vital for fiction writing as the 2000s were for indie and online filmmaking. There are big-name writers here, reinventing how they write and publish their craft. Even more exciting are the newer writers, of all ages, who are conceptualising and testing entirely new forms and distribution models. A decade from now, it will be obvious to see in retrospect, but you can already see it if you squint. Russell Nohelty, Claire Venus, David McElroy, and Sarah Fay prodding at the edges and figuring out the business framework. Eleanor Anstruther is serialising her work and melding the traditional and digital ends of the industry, and digging into the wider scene with her 8 Questions interviews. Margaret Atwood, Chuck Palahniuk, Luke Jennings, Molly Knox Ostertag, Andy Stevenson and others are adding the newsletter to their toolkits. Elle Griffin keeps tearing at the firmament and spreading the word to print media. Jamie Buckley is reinventing his comics career in front of our eyes. T.K. Hall is publicly chronicling and celebrating his recovery from devastating writer's block, inspiring the rest of us at the same time. Developers of Software Scrivener are turning to Substack to find exciting writers to feature on their webinar series, courtesy of Oliver Evanson. Alex Dobrenko is fighting Mike Sowden, and nobody knows why. In other words, it's a community. We're actually in a healthier position than filmmakers were because this is all happening in the post-social era. On the newsletter platforms, we get to properly own our readerships and can take our subscribers with us as we navigate any choppy waters up ahead. As much as YouTube enabled an explosion of creativity, those most successful, such as Corridor Digital, have spent the last 5 years trying to figure out how to extricate themselves, or at least build a future-proofed foundation. That's why they have their own platform now, based around direct subscriptions. They've had to do that because YouTube has always had one foot in the old way of doing things, powered by advertising and reluctant to properly share with its lifeblood creators. The likes of Substack and Ghost have had a healthier respect for their writers from the beginning. Substack's subscription model is designed to address some of the tech missteps from the last decade. Whatever else is to come over the next 20 years, we're in the position to roll with it. I could add another 1,000 words to this essay simply by listing more exciting writers. But really it's better if you go and discover them for yourself. And if you're a writer, grab your keyboard and get on the wave with the rest of us. Thanks for listening. Do leave a comment and say hello over on the newsletter version at simonkjones.substack.com.